Good morning. I just want to ensure that even though I'm a consultant, I'm not going to show you any slides, so you're safe. The other thing is that Sandeep reminds me that I am coming back to the GCC after exactly 10 years. Now, in an industry as dynamic as yours, I get scared about using decades because many of you would have been in school at that stage, so you'll have to forgive me. But it's a real pleasure to be here, and even more, to have been posed the two questions that you have of me. What are India's geopolitical imperatives, and how may soft power help with them? So anything which is soft, everyone thinks of it as mushy and difficult to measure. So the first thing I want to do is give soft power a tangible goal. And it's very important to give soft power a tangible goal in nasscom because you are part of India's soft power. But we should have no illusions. As India will go from a 3.7 trillion to a 10 trillion economy in the next 10 years, India will become threatening. It will become threatening to all the countries we look as partners and allies today. But we should have a 10-year run. China had a 10-year run, and we are certainly nicer people than the Chinese, so we should have a 10-year run. But will soft power give us a 15-year run? That's the target we should give soft power. So when I start, I want to congratulate you because you are in a sense, the best embodiment of the new India story. A story distinct from snake charmers and poverty to the cutting edge. I think all told, if I don't get trapped in the nasscom divisions of GCC and ITES and engineering services, you all are about 7 million people, employing 7 million people. And I also understand why you chose Whitefield as the location. Because whether you all know it or not, this street has the highest concentration of Fortune 100 companies in the world. And I think you can applaud yourself for that. But now to the important question you've posed. First, why are we talking about geopolitics all of a sudden? We had this 30-year run post the Soviet Union collapse of globalization, of WTO, of free trade, of bringing down barriers. And all of a sudden, that era seems to be over. Multilateralism has given way to regional and even bilateral deals. And it has happened suddenly. But if you look at it, at the core, the elements that were going to fuel it were starting to be evident almost 10 years ago. Joblessness, inequality, and the subtle rise of China, and then the not-so-subtle rise of China with the emergence of Xi Jinping. And that muscular policy of his foreign muscular policy brought about the natural reaction that you could imagine. And so now, if there is one thing on which there is bipartisan support in the US, it is on the bash China policy. There is absolutely no division between a country which is so divided. It is quite remarkable. So within this context, all countries and all companies need to develop what I call geopolitical agility. And I think that that time is very much upon us. The world order has changed so much that one of the most astute observers of geopolitics, Ian Bremmer, has called what's going on today a geopolitical recession. He says, why do we use the term recession only for the economy? Currently, we have a geopolitical recession, a recession which is structural in a way that no individual leader can address it. It is structural in a sense that it can't be easily unwound. So we need to learn to live with it. And living with this means this whole belief that that China could be the manufacturing nation of the world is over. No one is willing to be dependent on any country in that way again. So we should anticipate more such anxiety, as should GCCs. So if we just reflect in the last 4 years, what's happened? US and China have become open competitors, rivals, almost in conflict, at least in technology in conflict, in other areas in accentuated competition. It is a fact today. Geopolitics is, globalization is a fact, it's not a policy. But the nature of globalization is under deep challenge. The war in Ukraine has started to change geopolitical partnerships. You can see China, Iran, Russia coming together in an unhappy kind of an alignment because they are not natural partners. Trump becoming president again, if he is not in jail, could make some of that change. Europe is extremely anxious right now. It's in a very bad place. It's trapped between US and China. Just imagine, German auto, Italian engineering, French luxury, one of the largest markets was China, and now they don't know how to navigate it. So it's tough. And then all their energy supplies from Russia have changed. So they're having a tough time. I mean, if you just go back to 2009, the US and Europe, EU, were similar-sized economies. Today, US is almost double the size of the EU. So it's going through a tough stage, and also it's really finding geopolitics hard today. Israel, of course, is creating the biggest problem for the US that it can, and also for itself. But it's making another change, which was starting to even out in the Middle East, now has again become contentious. So even if you want to fly to London now, you'll spend 2 hours more. And in all of this, despite our unfortunate neighborhood of having Pakistan and having China and having everyone around us, we have managed pretty well. We are okay with the US, we are okay with Japan, we are okay with Australia, we are okay with UK, we are okay with Europe. And most of all, we are very close to the Middle East and Saudi. So much so that when we did Article 370, Saudi and Middle East had no problems. So we have created a geopolitical kind of an oasis for ourselves. But we'll have to work at it. And so on one hand, geopolitics has changed. It has become, something which is changing every day. Ian Bremmer has called it a recession, but we are managing to navigate that just yet. Within this, our economy is doing really well. despite joblessness, inflation, etc., which is all true, the macro economy, the estimates of World Bank and IMF say in the next 6 years we'll add another India. We'll go from 3.6 to $7 trillion. We will go from being less than 1% of global GDP 20 years ago to almost 5.5% of global GDP in 5 years' time. We are already 3.5%. So from being somewhat inconsequential, we are starting to become significant. And in this, there have been a set of changes which are now starting to play out. You can see it in infrastructure, not always in Bangalore, but certainly in Bombay. Come to Bombay, I'll show you real changes in infrastructure. Then DPI. DPI has been fantastic. Whether it is Aadhaar, whether it is UPI, whether it is CoWIN, whether it is the ONDC which is coming around. This is phenomenal. We consume more data than US and China combined today. I mean, who could have imagined that? The indices, MSCI, is now taking us from 8% to 26%. So we are going to get money coming in. And we have to be ready for that. But while the macro looks good, the micro is still tough. We are very poor. We've per capita of less than $3,000. And it'll take us another 20, 25 years to get to 10,000. And if we really look at India, we are 3 countries. We have 50 million Europeans, 500 million Indonesians, and about 950 million sub-Saharan Africans. And so this makes India's 950 million people make the country somewhat politically contentious. But on the other side, because of the poverty, our threat to the rest of the world is a little less. So in a strange way, the macro is going through without the same kind of backlash that you might anticipate. And the backlash against China is creating for us all this narrative about a China plus one or a China plus many, and which creates the advantage. So, what must India do? With our soft power, what is soft power? Joseph Nye, after the Soviet Union collapse, coined this phrase, right? Soft power is the ability to co-opt rather than coerce. It involves shaping through appeal and attraction by the use of culture, political values, foreign policies to get this. Actually, the first exponent of soft power, or the early exponent of soft power, was Mahatma Gandhi. Ahimsa, he was politically astute and a moral colossus. So he chose ahimsa, which was a human value, which the superpower couldn't challenge, and it also created a groundswell of support. Actually, William Dalrymple noted, India has always had a strange way with her conquerors. In defeat, she beckons them in and then slowly seduces, assimilates, and transforms them. So, but this Gandhian thing, I was in Vienna the other day, and one of the European diplomats said, foreign policy used to be about interest. But with India, we always thought it was about your values coming from Gandhi. So how will you have not sanctioned Russia? So I said, now we are also discovering our interest. So, he said, okay, I get that. And you look at the G20, again, we could get a consensus in this world. Can you imagine? No one could have imagined that we would have a consensus communique. And it was the Vasudeva Kutumbakam that allowed it to go through. So, India's soft power stands for China and Pakistan. The world doesn't feel threatened with us. our tolerance, secularism, inclusive nature, democratic government, food, movies, strong diaspora, use of the English language is really strong. And I was in Seattle some time ago, and I was the youngsters had taken me to a nightclub, and they were all dancing to Bollywood music. And I said, "This is Seattle." They said, "Yeah." So, I mean, you could see that. But even with soft power, the most dominant power is the US. Its media, its movies, its stories are multiple. And it does shape the narrative. It is in a true sense a hegemon. What is in its own interest, it makes the world believe it's in the world's best interest. And we need to recognize that and build our own soft power. So the global South cannot be trapped in one story. And India is breaking through. And you all are helping India come up with different stories. All of you should see this video, TED talk of Chimamanda Adichie when she talks about the single story. I really urge you all to remember the name and see the TED story, where she says how stereotypes define nations other than the rich nations. And so we need to have our multiple stories. And NASSCOM is creating India's multiple story. But soft power without being backed by hard power doesn't go that far. So we need to improve our nuclear, military, technology, economy, and space. We need to. And our foreign policy has moved from non-alignment to strategic autonomy, which now says we are not on your side, we are not on your enemy's side, we are on our side, and we have a side, which means we sit on the table, right? So we have navigated this situation. We are condoning with Iran, we are buying oil from Russia, we are in a part of the Quad with the US, we are building ties with Japan. It's a particularly unique and powerful geopolitical foreign policy success for us. Outstanding success. But as I come to closing, this Quad, I2, U2, BRICS, G20 is not enough. An opportunity is not the same as an outcome. We have a great opportunity, but we don't yet have the full outcome. Why are there only 1,500 GCCs in India? Why are there not 5,000? Why are the GCCs only employing 1.5 million people and not 15 million people? We really need to ask that we need to make the brand of NASSCOM have the fragrance of quality and perfection. That will be the best kind of soft power. Perfection and quality. And we are all responsible for building it. So I want to end in the words of Gurudev, and I want to propose for NASSCOM that this poem of his, which all of you know, which I am going to read to you, should become a part of the NASSCOM invocation, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its aim towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way, into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee, into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Thank you.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.